Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the FutureTech podcast. It's me, Charlie Sell, the COO of Hydrogen, where I get a chance to speak to thought leaders, people passionate, not just about STEM and the careers that STEM can offer you, but young people in general and helping people get a footstep into their first careers. As always, the podcast is supported by the STEM Ambassador Association, and I am really pleased to have Gareth Tupper with me today. Gareth is the Director of Engineering at New Day, and for those who may or may not know, New Day is a really impressive fintech business that has scaled and been doing some really impressive things over the last few years. I think Gareth has been with the business for a little while now and has really helped sort of take it on a journey, which I'm sure we'll hear a bit about today. Without further ado, Gareth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, and it's great to have you. I mean, we've had a bit of IT problems getting this set up, so I'm glad I've now been able to fix it all. But let's jump straight in. And yeah, please tell us a bit about your story and how you got into tech.
Well, I guess my story, I don't know whether this is a usual story now, but it was certainly a usual story at the time. I got into technology through computers at school. And when I first started at school, there weren't computers in school. And I think I remember the day when the first computer was wheeled in to school, literally on wheels, because computers were wheeled in on wheels those days. I mean, this was 40 years ago. So it was perhaps the people listening to this will not remember this at all, but it was an old sort of BBC micro computer. And I was instantly interested in computers and how they work. And I didn't actually realise how interested until I think my mum was told on a parents' evening, Gareth is really interested in the computers. And so we got a computer at home, which was an old kind of Amstrad computer, and I taught myself to program. Again, a lot of people listening to this will seem like the dark ages, but you literally wrote programs, recorded them on cassette tapes, and saved them. And that's how I first got into computers. I was very fortunate as a teenager to get work experience and then subsequent jobs all the way kind of up to sort of holidays from school, university at a company that actually made computers. So it was called Acorn, and they made the computers that we had in school, in fact, so the kind of old BBC Micros, Archimedes computers. So I had a tremendous opportunity to sort of experience what technology was like in technology organizations, probably before a lot of people kind of did it. This was like 30 years ago now, so it really set me on a path of this is what I wanted to do with my career, at a time where technology careers, certainly in computing, it was still a bit niche, really. So I went on to study computer science at university, and then I went on as a career as a developer, or as a software engineer, as we would probably more commonly term it now. I did that for a number of years, but I think my career quickly pivoted towards lots of different things, all in the technology field. I work as project management, business analysis, architecture. I did lots and lots of different things, and more so the common theme was leading and managing and building teams. I think I kind of figured out fairly early on that was a kind of a strong suit for me. And then I think I gravitated back towards sort of software development probably about sort of 10, 11, 12 years ago now. And really this was as sort of agile became very fashionable in kind of corporates. And I think what attracted me to it is I think I really enjoyed the kind of people, process, team dynamic, and it actually was increasingly something that I enjoyed and was good at. And I probably spent the last sort of decade or so building engineering teams. So I've worked through a number of different companies, from small teams to big teams. I actually joined my current company, New Day, when they were sort of starting out building something from scratch. So I think I went from leading a team of about 150 people in my last organization, I think, to managing like 10 people in a small part of the corner of an office. And that's grown hugely in the years that I've been there. So we've gone from sort of a handful of people up to hundreds of people now. So it's really been a huge journey of growth, and exactly the reason I joined to do that. So my career has really been a variety of different things, but gravitating towards leading teams and growing teams.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And what a lovely segue actually into what I think would be so interesting to so many of our listeners, which, how do you actually build teams and what are the dynamics? Because as you say, what just sounds really interesting is you chose to go and maybe do it 2 or 3 times over, from having built large teams and all the fun and challenges to then starting it again, doing it again. Yeah, what's the secret? In your opinion, what's the secret to be able to actually build and retain great people?
So I think in technology, particularly software engineering, there's a kind of a unique characteristics of teams and how to get work done, because it's inherently complex and fast moving and highly adaptive. So you could have this conversation with people in many, many different industries around how do you build teams, how do you create culture. But I think there is a uniqueness to technology teams. And I think what I have learned is really, in order to get the best out of teams and people, you really need to focus on the contribution of the work. So engineers and technologists like to build things. They like to create things. You don't know everything that you need to know, and you discover it as you go along. And that's why I think the huge popularity of like Agile really took over sort of 20 years ago in the industry, because it's about building teams that can learn and adapt. I mean, there's some fairly kind of important patterns that have emerged really over the last sort of 10, 15 years, which is about organizing people into teams, keeping teams small so that their communication is limited, giving teams autonomy so that they can learn, that they can adapt. And I think embracing that learning and adaptive culture, I think, is the kind of key ingredient to how you sort of build successful teams in technology.
Yeah. Well, you probably saw me scribbling down there, because I just couldn't agree with you more. Keeping teams small so that there's open and transparent communication, I think, is a really important thing, isn't it? The more, and do you think that time is also a great creator of high performing teams, when people are spending a decent amount of time working, understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses?
I do, yeah. There's been plenty of books that have been written on concepts like psychological safety in organizations as well. And I think one of the things that I place a great deal of importance on is teams having retrospectives. So how do they learn? How do they adapt as they move forward? I think it's incredibly important for high performing teams. I mean, if I take you back to early in my career, when I started out as a developer, before a lot of these concepts existed, one of my first development roles, as sort of pre-agile being a thing, was in a team, and we worked together as a cross-functional team, and we had basically a quarterly set of objectives that we agreed with our stakeholders. We worked together as a team, we demonstrated progress to our stakeholders, and we kind of released it at the end. And as the organization grew, the strain on that model became to show, and we had a whole bunch of consultants that came in and said, you're doing it wrong. What you need to be doing is having a long waterfall process where you have lots of handoffs between specialist roles before you get the work done. So the concept of teams working closely together on a goal was entirely dissolved, and it was a very destructive period for that organization in terms of its productivity. And it went all the way back again to small agile teams, which is kind of where we started and how a lot of organizations work now. But I've kind of personally experienced what it's looked like if you choose not to go down that path. So I think that's probably increased my conviction on why this is an important ingredient to success.
Yeah. And a challenge I've seen with many people or in bigger teams, and actually this might be quite relevant to young people who are starting in an organization, is how do you retain culture and understanding as your team scale and you build this, hierarchy. Eventually, you can't manage 150 people, so you have to create the layers within the teams. How do you find? How do you know that the teams that are maybe one or two levels down are getting that same sort of training or support from what you give your direct reports?
Well, so my personal preference is to keep a very flat organization structure. So I try to minimize layers. So for the organization I run now, we have teams. One of the members of the team is the lead, and then we cluster them together into groups. It has an engineering manager, and then I have heads of departments that work for me, but I only have to kind of reach down kind of two layers, and I'm pretty in touch with the detail, and I make sure that group works together very closely to keep some cohesiveness of culture. So we value the same thing, we reward the same thing in terms of aspirations of people's careers and what we expect of them. I think it's very important to keep those consistent because those are the ingredients of culture, like what you value, what you reward, and what you take action of, and if it's not working. And I think that sort of closeness of spans of controls important. One of the things that I always do, and I advocate that people that work for me to do, is to have skip level meetings as well. So I not only talk to the people that work for me, I talk to the kind of people that kind of work for them as well, and it's sort of connected to people who are just starting out with their career. I think that's very important as well. So you have access, not just your boss, but your boss's boss, because I think early on in your career, I think that's probably more important than ever, particularly if you want to get on. And a lot of people, I think, when you're starting out in a career, those first few years are absolutely crucial to kind of learning and developing quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I love that concept. Skip meetings, making, as you say, having a flat hierarchy where you only need to go two or so layers and you're in the details. We talk a lot within our business about saying strategic, operational, tactical, and being able to move between the layers and having that detail and really supporting. And again, if I relate this to the young people who are listening, them having a platform to be able to talk, share ideas, actually be able to give their inputs is critical, isn't it? When we're thinking about building products or understanding evolving cultures, everyone needs to have a voice.
Absolutely. And I mean, to connect it very specifically to kind of people that are starting out, I think they have more of a voice than they perhaps realize because you can question things. You can come at things from a different angle. And if you don't understand something, you'll ask a question, but maybe no one else understood it either. And it's that fresh perspective is much more valuable than perhaps is appreciated. So what might feel like a vulnerable situation to someone early on in their career saying, can you help me with this? I don't understand it, actually could be incredibly useful. I would find it very valuable to hear someone in a junior position in the organization telling me what they don't understand and telling me what they find hard. I'd very much appreciate it because I would see that as a problem to fix.
Well, and how great for people listening to hear that from a director of engineering saying this as well. This is come and that if you can create that environment where people feel, well, you talked about it earlier, psychological safety, but it's not even that, just a culture where people can share ideas and have a voice. And I guess that leads really nicely onto the last part of the podcast. Right? And time flies by when speaking to people who are this passionate, especially about teams. I share that value, I share that belief, but what one or two bits of advice would you give a young person if when they're trying to get a foot in the door and want to join one of these teams? What can they do that would help set them apart or get them that opportunity?
Well, I thought about this, so I picked three things, but I was also going to make a confession. I feel slightly fraudulent. So I'm at home. I'm in my wife's office, and she records a podcast in here on careers, which is, if you're interested, it's called The Squiggly Career. And there's a book, and in the back of it, it's got like 100 pieces of career advice. So I had a look at that before I picked my three, but genuinely these three are like a personal thing to me. So the first thing is, my first piece of advice is think about the company you're joining. Pick the right company. I think the culture you choose to join in terms of its ability to embrace and nurture and develop people is so important. And I would I would choose as a first role and starting out in technology, the company over the role. Pick the company would be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is invest in building relationships. And as I said earlier, people will be willing to talk to you. And also, I would say that more people are willing to help you than perhaps you might think. So everybody started off somewhere. Everybody started somewhere. So asking for help from a position of, well, I'm a new person, can you help me? I think more people than not would be willing to help. So build relationships and ask for help. And I think the people who I see succeeding and moving quickly in organizations are the people that build their networks quickly and are able to ask for help and are able to learn. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that have kind of joined my organization, and I also say spend the time in the office. A lot of companies offer hybrid working now where you can work at home or work in the office. My company is one of them. But spend as much time in the office, be around people, build those relationships. People will help you. And then the third one, which is actually in my wife's book, but this was important to me when I was particularly early on in my career. I learned this, and this is like run your own race. So if anyone does running or marathons, it's very easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing, but really run your own race. So don't worry about everyone else is doing. Worry about what you're doing. And I think particularly early on in your career, you can think you get worried about such and such is promoted ahead of you or favored for this project you wanted to work on over you. I think you can waste a lot of energy on that. My third piece of advice is run your own race, focus on yourself and developing yourself. Those are my three things.
Yeah, well, what a wonderful coincidence that, your wife is as involved and as interested in this topic as you are, and the fact that she runs her own podcast on it. That is just fantastic because I really, again, just hearing and seeing you're passionate behind it, but yeah, picking the right company, culture and company will trump specific job, won't it? If you're looking to flourish and really try to learn, and then within their relationships, asking for help, building networks. And again, I totally agree with you in regards to, hybrid working has many, many benefits, but I will forever be an advocate, and especially the more junior on your career, of having that time with colleagues, with senior colleagues, and really, I call it osmosis learning from seeing and doing as much as it is about studying. And yeah, as you said, relationships, cooler water chats, coffee chats to pick a problem rather than having to wait to book an appointment or book a time slot can really help. And well, that last bit really resonated. Run your own race. I think that's a really, really good one. I think people can spend too much time worrying about others or worrying about where they are. And actually, if you focus on what you can do, you're going to be successful. So although I've just repeated everything you said, I couldn't agree with you more. That's been really three really good bits of advice.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you, Gareth. Time has flown by. Now, that's another of our episodes done. But for me, just a massive thank you to you. So thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, to our listeners, so that's another episode of FutureTech. As many of you know, this is shared with the STEM Ambassador Association, and it's also on our website with links shared on LinkedIn. And so that is an episode of FutureTech, and thank you for everyone listening.